Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Easy English podcast. My name is Adam, and in this video, we will be learning English through comprehensible input, listening practice by hearing about the story of Hiroo Onoda, the Japanese soldier that fought in World War II for 30 more years after the war had ended. Hiroo Onoda was born in Japan in the year 1922. When World War II eventually broke out and conflict between the Empire of Japan and the United States became very, very fierce, Hiroo Onoda joined the Japanese military. In the year 1944, Hiroo Onoda was sent to Lubang Island in the Philippines. This is where Hiroo Onoda's bizarre and kind of dark story begins. When Hiroo Onoda arrived in the Philippines, his commander gave him one mission. He told Hiroo Onoda to never surrender. This was very common in the Japanese military during World War II. A lot of times soldiers were expected to die before surrendering. With this idea in mind, Hiroo Onoda was dedicated to continuing his fight as long as possible. He was not going to surrender. Now, although Hiroo Onoda had told himself that he would never surrender, the same was not true for his home country of Japan. Because in the year 1945, Japan officially surrendered to the United States, ending World War II. The United States dropped atomic bombs on two very important Japanese cities, which caused Japan to officially surrender. Although this is a story for another day. When Japan first surrendered, Hiroo Onoda did not hear the news. He and some of his fellow soldiers were in a very deep jungle, so it was very difficult to communicate with them. They did not have access to televisions or anything like that where they could hear the news of Japan's surrender. Planes were flown over the jungle and they dropped pieces of paper that basically explained that Japan had surrendered. They were trying to tell Hiroo Onoda and his men that the war was over and they did not need to keep fighting. Hiroo Onoda found some of these pamphlets and he read the news, but he did not believe it. He was so sure that Japan would never surrender that he believed the news was not true. He believed that they were trying to deceive him or lie to him about what was going on. He was sure in his mind that the war was still going on. For many years, Hiroo Onoda and 3 other Japanese soldiers lived in the jungle in the Philippines, still believing that the war was going on. Eventually, one of the soldiers who was with Hiroo Onoda decided to leave the group in 1949, and he surrendered. With this soldier now entering the world again, he began telling people that Hiroo Onoda and the 2 other soldiers were still alive, hiding in the jungle. Another one of the soldiers stayed with Hiroo Onoda for about 10 years, but eventually he was killed in a shootout with Philippine authorities. For almost 20 more years, it was just Hiroo Onoda and one other soldier living in the jungle. Although in 1972, that other soldier was also killed in a shootout with Philippine authorities, leaving Hiroo Onoda the only soldier left hiding in the jungle. Throughout the entire time that Hiroo Onoda and these other soldiers were living in the jungle, they truly believed that they were still fighting in a world war. So during this time, they were involved in multiple attacks against Philippine locals. Sadly, throughout the 30 years that Hiroo Onoda was in the jungle, he and his fellow soldiers killed about 30 Philippine locals. By 1974, Hiroo Onoda was still alone living in the jungle. At this point, World War II had been over for 30 years. People were starting to lose hope that they could ever convince Hiroo Onoda of the truth. And of course, many people were actually dying as a result of the attacks being carried out by this former soldier. Eventually, it was decided that perhaps the only person who could convince Hiroo Onoda that the war was over and that he needed to leave the jungle was one of his former leaders who had originally ordered him to never surrender. So one of his original commanders went out into the jungle to find Hiroo Onoda. When Onoda's commander found him, he ordered him to stop fighting. This was finally enough for Onoda to finally leave the jungle and to accept that the war was now over. Now, very controversially, Hiroo Onoda was not punished for the many people that he had killed while he was living in the jungle. The president of the Philippines actually pardoned him, which meant that he was allowed to go home. The reason why the president of the Philippines pardoned him was because he genuinely believed that he was still fighting in a war. So in his mind, he was just following orders. Now, this was very controversial and made a lot of people very angry because a lot of people had family members who had been killed by Hiroo Onoda. After Hiroo Onoda was pardoned, he returned to Japan. When Hiroo Onoda returned to Japan, there was a lot of celebration about his return. A lot of people were very happy to see him back. Unfortunately for Hiroo Onoda, it was very difficult for him to adjust to life in 1974. Hiroo Onoda had been living in the jungle for so long that life was very different when he had left the jungle than when he had entered it. There were so many technological, social, and governmental changes that made it very difficult for him to adjust to a modern day lifestyle. Eventually, Hiroo Onoda moved to Brazil and became a farmer. He wanted to find a quieter and simpler lifestyle. It was during this time that he got married. He also eventually started to return to Japan, and he even set up a little school where he taught children survival skills that he had learned during those 30 years that he was in the jungle. He also wrote some books about his life in the jungle in the Philippines. Hiroo Onoda later died in the year 2014 at the age of 91. I hope you enjoyed this easy English podcast. For more videos like this one, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.